Greetings, Geeklings, and welcome back to the Geek Channel here. We are going to jump right back in with catching up on the movie trailers I missed while I live in the House of the Dead, aka just my regular house with everybody in it sick last week. But before we begin, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so that you can always be a part of Geek Nation. So another trailer that dropped that I'm pretty excited about actually is Aquaman. The DCEU is obviously not as strong as the MCU right now. A big part of that issue is the fact that they wanted to kind of catch up to Marvel, whereas Marvel's obviously had this long-term plan, making movies that could be really strong and stand by themselves, but that could come together and build on something. You know, they weren't going to be able to catch up in the sort of time frame that they were trying to. Marvel's had a decade to work on this. One of the big criticisms of Suicide Squad is the fact that they kind of just jumped into a group movie trying to kind of keep up with the Avengers sort of thing, but the characters aren't really that developed. And I could go on a whole thing about the Suicide Squad movie and my thoughts on it. But I think that was one of the big reasons it wasn't successful. It was just trying to jump in for this big kind of blockbuster, but it wasn't doing any of the work to really have the payoff. Justice League suffered from this as well. Obviously, it was trying to establish Superman and Batman. And really, Batman v Superman was, I think, supposed to be a Batman movie, but it really just came off more like a Superman movie that Batman was getting a lot of screen time, and it didn't really feel like its own sort of introduction to the character, and it had a ton of problems on its own. So using those two as the launch point to get into Justice League was already going to be a difficult transition, and Justice League just it could be a whole other video again. It just had so many problems, guys. But there were two things that I think Justice League did really well, and that would be the casting of Jason Momoa and Ezra Miller. Ezra Miller, for those of you who might not recognize the name right off the bat, he is the Flash in that, and he is spot on fantastic. And I'm not going to go on like a who's better Flash. I think the actor whose name I can't recall right now who plays Flash on the CW is fantastic. But it's just a different interpretation of the Flash, and I think most of us, if not all of us, can agree that when the Justice League trailer dropped, the scene with Barry Allen meeting Bruce Wayne probably kind of stole the show there, and it kind of stole the movie. Every scene he was in was great. Another choice that I thought was great was Jason Momoa. I don't think he was used as well as he could have been in the movie. I know that for some people the criticism was that he seemed too much not like Aquaman, or too much like they were trying to go really, really hard in another direction with him, which I'll kind of get to later. But he also just didn't get enough development and screen time. So I'm hoping that this movie, standalone, will be sort of an opportunity for redemption. I'm going to guess that it's a sequel, but maybe not. They might decide to bounce around and do a prequel to get more of an origin. Maybe try to make him mysterious by introducing him to the group, then going back. I don't know. We'll find out in like 30 seconds. But yeah, let's just jump right in and see what's going to happen with him, and then we can go on from there, because when it comes to the DCEU right now, trying to make predictions, who knows?
My father was a lighthouse keeper. My mother was a queen. But life has a way of bringing people together.
We could unite our worlds one day.
Check it out. Arthur is talking to the fish.
They made me what I am. Permission to come aboard?
I've been looking for you. Your half-brother, King Orm, is about to declare war upon the surface world. The only way to stop this war is for you to take your rightful place as king.
Trust me, I am no king.
You do your best thinking when you're not thinking at all.
That was the worst pep talk ever.
I want to strap in. Welcome home.
My brother has come from the surface to challenge me for the throne.
I call it an ass whooping. no leader. I came because I have no choice. I came to save my home and the people that I love.
You think you're unworthy to lead because you're of two different worlds. But that is exactly why you are worthy.
That was awesome.
The war is coming to the surface, and I'm bringing the wrath of the seven seas with me.
We're here.
What are you doing? Wait.
You never parachute.
Redheads! You gotta love them.
Okay, wow, so a lot just happened there. So I guess right off the bat, the one thing I kind of noticed that doesn't bother me, but it's kind of a little funny, is it feels like when they're showing like little Arthur, you know, figuring out his powers, or let's see if I can find it. You know, it's kind of got this like Harry Potter thing where like, you know, the kids are making fun of him, and then like he's talking to an animal, and the animals come to his protection. And I'm kind of guessing, or at least I'm interpreting it as almost like a sort of joke to the sort of like lip service fandom who are like really into comic books, but they don't actually know very much about Aquaman. So it kind of comes to the like, oh, well, you know, Aquaman's powers, he talks to fish, you know, which by itself, when you think about it, is kind of a badass power, at least when you see how it's used in things like the Injustice games, where you're gonna be like, yo, shark, eat. So I'm just saying that not all fish are bad to have on your side as an enemy. But one of the big problems with Aquaman as a character historically is that he's not as prevalent as someone like Superman or Batman or Spider-Man, where most people, even if you're not a comic book fan, you're probably going to recognize that hero if you see them visually and know who they are. You're going to have some cursory sense of what their power is, maybe even know their real life identity name, just because it's a thing that gets talked about. It's a really big part of the cultural lexicon. Aquaman is mostly always been a pretty big part of like Justice League or group outings, but he's always been sort of a cursory character. So I feel like most people see a sort of like Super Friends representation of him, you know, where he's like the orange and green sticky wetsuit and like the short clean cut sort of like blonde jock football player look, and he like rides in on the back of a whale shark or something, is like, go, and like all the eels jump out at someone or something. And it's usually done in more of like a kitschy, campy way, or even maybe for comedic effect. So I think that's probably one of the big things that people, A, have as a fear with an Aquaman movie, but also that their casting and portrayal of the character within the DCEU is really trying to get at. Jason Momoa from Game of Thrones, I don't watch Game of Thrones, sorry, nerd confession, but I'm pretty sure that's where he's from. But either way, he is a big badass dude. You're not going to look at that guy and make fun of him if he talks to a fish, you know what I mean? Like, he's someone physically who looks like he can be a warrior, be a leader, can be a threat. He has pretty good comedic timing. Again, I'm not familiar with his body of work prior to this, but I like that his sort of like casual snideness and how he delivers these little one-liners. You know, I think was it in the Justice League movie where he like downed that bottle and like puts it down and he's like, it's on his tab to Bruce Wayne. You know, it's just this sort of subtle like, I'm comfortable with myself and I'm a little cocky and I kind of know what I can or can't get away with. And I think that's probably important for a character like him, who's supposed to be this sort of dichotomy of two worlds. You know, he's human and not human. He's Atlantean but not Atlantean, and he's trying to figure that out. And I think with those type of characters, you can kind of either go to one end where they're super uncomfortable, which like right here as a kid, you know, before he gets golden flashy eyes of magic, he looks pretty unsure of himself. But then on the other end, you get these characters who sort of develop this sense of like, being more badass because they're like so put upon and nobody understands what it's like to be them. And he definitely comes off like he's going to be more of like a iron pumping grown up punker emo Aquaman than the, you know, ride the octopus into battle and like pick the enemies up with tentacles like you'd see in some of the cartoons. So yeah, I just like here, you know, and he's having his Harry speaking partial tongue moment, and then all the animals.
They made me what I am.
Yeah, so it definitely plays off a little differently with the snake getting out. You know, in Harry Potter was definitely more of a, you know, Dudley and his friend are being all like, Harry did it, and everyone else is like, oh, that's weird, what happened to this cage? This clearly is being presented as more of a autonomy in his power and his ability here. So I think that's really interesting, and it'll be interesting to see how they frame his childhood. Is he someone who becomes an outcast or purposely isolates himself or something because people are like, oh man, that weird Arthur Curry kid, like remember he was the one at the aquarium with the shark thing, or how much his dad might isolate him because of his heritage. It looked like there was a scene a little later where he was maybe a teenager being trained, someone throwing a trident at him, maybe his mom or another Atlantean, but he definitely looked younger. We'll get there. But it'll be interesting to see how they unfold his childhood and his origin story. It will also be interesting to see how they frame his life on the surface, because all we really got in Justice League was that he was using his power to help feed people, which is great, but he didn't seem like the sit around and let everyone fawn on him sort of hero. It seemed like he came and went as he needed and kind of didn't answer to anyone. And certainly everyone there seemed very respectful of not just immediately like, oh yeah, Arthur, he's right over there. You know, when Bruce came, they appreciated his power or whatever it was, or whatever their understanding of it is and how he was using it. So it's kind of got that, like, again, that sort of martyr thing, you know, where he's like, oh, I'm going to help people, but like, I'm going to go brood alone afterwards. So he and Batman should probably be biffles at this point. Let's kind of scrub bar through what else I was thinking. Okay, here's like another moment when he's like, can I come aboard? Like, just that sort of like fun humor, but I think when you present it in this literal and figurative package, it comes off a little less campy and a little more like someone who's having a good time with themselves. And this is someone who's making snide comments because they know that they're about to kick your ass, basically. You don't have to worry too much about what's happening after that. Here's where I'm not sure what I think is happening, the timeline. It's interesting because starting at this point in the story, everything, or in the trailer, this mini story, it's really being framed as a sort of, you know, prodigal son coming home, save the kingdom because, you know, the evil half-brother is going to take it over and he's going to hurt the surface world. He's going to invade the neighboring kingdom. He's going to do whatever fits the plot to get you back there and have you realize that it's okay to be parts of two different worlds. So that was interesting because that makes me feel like maybe this takes place before Justice League, because certainly we've seen he knows Mira. I'll find a clip of her and show for anyone who's not familiar with the redheaded woman who is usually his wife later and the mother of his child. She is speaking to him, so it's hard to say if this is continuing from Justice League or this is how he meets her before that. So it'll be kind of interesting to see what happens with that. Scrubbing through here a little bit, we kind of see some of the stakes, and I do like that when they're showing, where was it? So especially in recent years when we've had so many tsunamis and hurricanes and natural disasters, I think we're as a whole getting a better sense of just how dangerous the water and coastal lines can be. So I think showing this conflict as less of just like Aquaman, he talks to animals and tries to help his friends, but making it the surface versus the underwater worlds and showing the full range of the Atlanteans' power and everything they can do to hurt the surface world. I think that's an interesting take. I think it gives it a little bit more chutzpah. It makes it something that's a little more threatening than the sort of stereotype people have of just Aquaman and what he can do. So that'll be interesting to see how that unfolds. Where's the next one? So we see Mira, so there, the redhead. It clears up, but we'll find another one. But she kind of is the bridge to him to come back. We sort of see here that he seems like he's uncomfortable going into this world. Certainly we know he's uncomfortable being a king. But even with Thor, you know, it took several movies before he got to the point where he's like, all right, it's my throne now, I have to step into it. So that doesn't necessarily mean it's an origin story. But I'm going to guess both on the sort of history of the DCEU and some of the decisions they've made with scripts and characters, and the fact that Thor's development from not sure he should be a king after being cast out of Asgard in the first movie to finally accepting it, that took place over like 4 or 5 movies. And the DCEU, as we've talked about, they move too quickly. They don't develop that. So I'm going to guess if we're seeing this conflict, it's more than likely from a prequel standpoint. Oh, yes, we got to challenge the brother. Oh, this moment I like. It kind of makes me think that the movie's going to have a good sense of humor. So they have that kind of moment that's like every sports fan at every sports game ever that you see represented in media, which makes me wonder what the sort of cultural divides are going to be between the Atlanteans and Arthur's experience on the surface, and how much he bridges that, how much that sort of like warrior passion seems to be a part of him, because certainly when you're seeing not just his half-brother taking rule, but the armies he's putting together and the way they're watching the spectacle of the fight, it seems like this might be something where he kind of comes to understand a part of himself, which could be kind of an interesting way for him to be like, oh, you know, parts of my personality or maybe part of my heritage. So that could be interesting, but again, it's the DCEU, so I'm making a lot of predictions and drawing a lot of things from all the canon I'm familiar with, from like the comics and from various other representations, and especially from like Justice League and Justice League Ultimate, the animated shows, which I love Aquaman in those. If you're not familiar with those, just go find like a 5-minute clip. I mean, the first 2 episodes of the Justice League animated series that were done during the same time as like the Superman the animated series and Batman, so same voice cast for both those actors, which was great because they were kind of making their own sort of DCEU and animation then, but that's sort of a different story. But in that, it starts with Atlantis. Maybe? It might start with Martian Manhunter, but Atlantis is definitely in that first like set of 5 or 10 episodes. And you see Arthur Curry, and you see him have to deal with that sort of conflict of, you know, someone trying to usurp the throne and what it costs him. And one of the really cool choices they make is that, like, right away, he loses an arm in battle. Like, he gets, like, this cool hook for the rest of the show, but he's this, like, big, hairy, strong guy. He's portrayed as a fierce warrior. Clearly, that's the direction they're taking when they cast him in the first place. So I think they're going to keep that sort of sense of, you know, sort of dark, foreboding warrior, and then just add in that cheeky sense of humor. But it'll be interesting to see how far they take the story, because in that, like, Mira's killed and he saves his son. Clearly at this point, or clearly, from the way they're portraying it in the trailer, it looks like he and Mira are just starting a relationship. So it'll be interesting to see how they kind of take the bits and pieces together. Oh, this is also going to be in December. Cool. For some reason I was thinking March. That's Captain Marvel. Yeah, so here's the one scene I was talking about. So yeah, so clearly he was a teenager in that scene. So it'll be interesting to see who they have placed him with as a training partner at that point. And sort of, are they grooming him to be king at that point, and then later decides he doesn't want to be? Does his dad die, and that becomes the tragedy he couldn't prevent, and now he wants to avoid his past? Or does he meet someone from Atlantis, or he's just like, nope, not into these people? So again, it'll be one where it's interesting to see how they take this origin story and hopefully give it a fresh spin. But again, DCEU, so who knows? Through here, some awesome underwater shots. Cool diving out of helicopters. I will say, and this is like such a dumb criticism, but it's every fanboy and fangirl out there when we're looking at comic book or game adaptations. You know, yeah, okay, it didn't show it too far, but her hair there, it's so red. And she has red hair, but I feel like her hair being vivid red like that, from a canon standpoint, isn't as integral as like Medusa's and Inhumans, which they totally botched with bad CG when they tried to do the show. So because her hair is just like, it's so insanely red there, it almost feels a little distracting to me, just because, especially, they've given him more of like just a buff tattooed dude sort of look. And no one else in Atlantis seems to have these sort of unnatural, highly stylized hair colors. The fact that she does, and especially against that like really bad CGI looking sunset, it really pops out in a way that I find a little distracting. I feel like I also saw a still image floating somewhere of him in a warrior outfit that was very sort of shiny orange, and that's totally awesome if they want to throw back to the original costume, but it's going to be on that kind of line again of like, you know, animating the Green Lantern suit. Like, how much do we push to trying too hard to look like the comic book and it ends up looking cartoony instead of looking like an homage to the original source material? Oh, this might even be video footage of that. No lies. Let's go.
The war is coming to the surface.
Oh, okay. So I didn't see the costume part I was talking about. It might not have been in here at all because I think it was some still images I saw floating around. But Black Badass. So yeah, we are going to get an introduction to a second villain here, and that is going to be pretty exciting. Oh god, can I get it again? Boom.
The war is coming to the surface.
That's pretty exciting for
Bringing
me
the wrath of the
because it's pretty exciting because I was thinking from the rest of the trailer up to this point that they were establishing it very firmly as like a, prodigal son comes home to reclaim his throne. The betrayal is within the family. He has to fight that, la 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 la. Sort of similar stories. I mean, basically it's Thor underwater, except that Arthur Curry grew up in the surface world. Thor was cast out. Not to be diminutive, but very similar storyline. They're adding in some other classic elements of Aquaman by bringing one of his biggest foes. What will be interesting is to see if they do it in a way where they introduce him and it's just enough to make him a threat, or if they kind of do the DCEU thing they do where they try to shove everything in the basket at once, because it has the potential to be a really cool conflict setup that maybe could generate buzz for another film. But I'm worried, especially because of their past history, bringing Doomsday in to Batman v Superman and like not just bringing him in too soon, but making him almost like this castaway character. That really kind of downplays the importance of a major moment in comic history with the death of Superman. So hopefully they don't do this here. But again, it's the DCEU, and I really want this movie to be good because I actually really like Aquaman. I think he gets a bad rap a lot. He's actually a pretty badass. And they did a good job casting. Like, they're clearly setting the tone for that. But it's all going to come down to whether or not they can rein themselves in when it comes to throwing everything they have. Because each movie they make, it feels more and more like they're not sure they're going to get to make another one, even though they have these grand plans. So just like throwing everything in just in case so they can get it out. And I'm hoping here they know how to take those ideas and just distill it down to something that is digestible and enjoyable, that makes people want more of the story. Because I think that the DCEU, it has potential. It just has some struggles too, and especially now that there are so many issues with Henry Cavill leaving Superman, which is fine. Like, he's fine. I just wasn't that plussed about him, so I could take or leave him. No offense, Henry. I'm sure you're great. But like Ben Affleck apparently really hates playing Batman, apparently, because he gets a lot of flack for it. And so it's one where they started building this on these two characters, and I think that regardless of what happens with some of that casting, they can keep it going, but they're going to have to focus less on throwing every idea they have at the wall to see what sticks, and really focusing on a couple essential ideas and making a really strong story. I think that's something that pretty much everyone who's been in these debates about the DCEU and their movies could tell you. But I'm hoping here that we're not seeing shades of, we have an idea, but we're going to sneak too much in there and kind of ruin it before it has a chance to pan out. And instead setting the seeds of, we're going to lay out everything you want in an Aquaman movie and leave you wanting more. So I think those are basically, most of the hits I wanted to touch on. At some point, if anyone's interested, I could definitely do an Aquaman video to talk just generally about some of the things about this character that are often misunderstood, some of the badass components that people forget. But I think this movie has potential. It's a trailer, so you don't know, but I'm seeing a lot of the right things to set up a fairly solid, if not predictable, origin story, but at least give Aquaman a chance to be a certain type of character that isn't what people expect. So hopefully this movie will be awesome. If any other trailers drop, we'll take a look at them and see if we can kind of modify sort of thoughts and ideas on what may or may not happen, or where we think this movie is in the timeline, or if it's at one point or before and after. Who knows? But since it looks like Justice League 2 won't be happening anytime soon, I am excited to at least see where the characters go, if not a little nervous about it. So thank you guys so much. Hopefully we'll have some more Aquaman coming up in the next few months as we prepare. As always, thank you for joining me on the Geek Channel here, and I'll see you next time.